Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 10, Episode 79. He's Dave Bryan, Myles Garrett, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being with us this Tuesday, Steelers Nation. Good to be back. Again, our off-season schedule kind of kicking off here. We'll be on Tuesday and Friday for the foreseeable future. If that changes, we'll let you know. But Dave Bryan is back from Florida. Good to have you back, Dave.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
All right, we got a whole lot to talk about today. I'm not even sure where to begin with this, to be perfectly honest with you. I guess let's kind of work backwards a little bit and kind of start with the most recent stuff, and then we'll kind of talk about things that happened last week and Kevin Colbert comments that maybe not, be as relevant right now. But what's happened really in the last 24 hours is Mike Tomlin yesterday was on First Take to defend Mason Rudolph against all of the Myles Garrett allegations that have come back up. And I think it's honestly just silly that we're even talking about this again, because we're just rehashing old information. It's ESPN creating its own news cycle, its own echo chamber, and providing no new information. But if you don't know what happened, though I imagine most fans do, Myles Garrett was on Outside the Lines with ESPN and, again, reiterated his claim that during the fight between the Steelers and the Browns in that first matchup that Rudolph used a slur, the N-word, to Garrett, and that's what sparked Garrett to retaliate and eventually hit him with his own helmet and get suspended for the rest of the year. Rudolph's denied that, and then Tomlin went on First Take yesterday to defend Mason Rudolph. So a lot to unpack there, Dave, I know, but what are your thoughts on this being a story again and your reaction to Tomlin going on First Take?
Yeah, first of all, when it comes to Myles Garrett, and I think Pro Football Talk's got a good article this morning on, taking a closer look at Myles Garrett, Myles Garrett's explanation of the Mason Rudolph incident, and how he says that Rudolph lost his helmet and that's why he didn't have a mic in the helmet. Well, Florio and them are quick to point out that the helmets don't have the mics in them. They have they have the headsets in them and all like that. Just the whole thing. Look, I mean, obviously, I don't know for sure what was said and what wasn't said on the field. The NFL has come out twice now, I think, and said, look, they have no audio. Their thorough investigation did not show anything. Mason Rudolph using any type of racial slur, throughout that incident back, week 11 or so against the Browns, and all. And, like you said, Myles Garrett had his suspension lifted by the commissioner, I think sometime last week, turn around and ESPN's right there, with the Outside the Lines interview and all, and, kind of creating their own news cycle, their own story there. And, Myles Garrett claims he doesn't want to make this a racial thing, but you know what? He's made it a racial thing. And, obviously Mason Rudolph came out right away, again, vehemently denied that. Mike Tomlin released a statement, I think over the weekend. I think the Outside the Lines thing came out sometime Saturday, I think it was. And then, fast forward now to Monday, and Mike Tomlin being, a guest on, First Take. That speaks that speaks loudly to me, because obviously this time of year, and Alex, Mike Tomlin goes into hibernation, if you will, this time of year. Yeah, we normally hear from Kevin Colbert this time of year, and yeah, Mike Tomlin usually speaks when we get to kind of the owners meeting there. I think sometime when is that, March or May? I forget when exactly that is, but normally this time of the off season, you just don't hear from Mike Tomlin. So for Mike Tomlin to basically, I think, go, seek out First Take, go on there and provide a level of defense, if you will, once again for Mason Rudolph, I think speaks volumes here. It really shows a coach that believes in his player. Obviously, Tomlin being, African American, I think speaks loudly here. And to be honest with you, and I obviously heard this thing firsthand yesterday and transcribed most of it. I think Tomlin did a phenomenal job in that interview yesterday.
I thought he did too. And you saw Rudolph, I think he quote tweeted the interview and said leader of men, and I'm sure that's going to be well received throughout the entire locker room. I don't think it's going to really change hearts and minds at this point. I think people are either in the Garrett camp and they believe him, or they're in the Rudolph camp and they believe him. Let me read a statement that Tomlin initially sent out, not on First Take, but just on social media after the reallegation came up. Tomlin says, quote, I support Mason Rudolph not only because I know him, but also because I was on that field immediately following the altercation with Myles Garrett and subsequently after the game. I interacted with a lot of people in the Cleveland Browns organization, players and coaches. If Mason said what Myles claimed, it would have come out during the many interactions I had with those in the Browns organization. In my conversations, I had a lot of expressions of sorrow for what transpired. I received no indication of anything racial or anything of that nature in those interactions. And that's what it comes down to, Dave. I mean, again, as you said, no one knows with certainty what did or did not happen, and we probably never will know. If we had some sort of smoking gun, we wouldn't be speculating right now. But all the circumstantial evidence and the lack of evidence on Garrett's side points to Rudolph more likely than not telling the truth here. Again, will that make a difference? Probably not. I think everyone has their opinion at this point, but I'm glad to see Tomlin come to his defense.
Yeah, look, I mean, sticking your neck out like that, the way and maybe not necessarily. That's probably a bad phrase to use, sticking your neck out, but making an appearance like that and saying what Tomlin did, if some sort of evidence were to come out, at some point. That proved that Mason Rudolph did use a racial slur. Obviously, it would make Mike Tomlin look quite foolish, right? So for Mike Tomlin, like I said, to come out and all this time after, when technically he doesn't have to, I think it really does speak volumes here. And a leader of men, players coach, whatever you want to call it, here with Mike Tomlin, there's going to be a lot of players around the NFL, I think, to step up and take notice of Mike Tomlin doing this. I don't know how many. I'm sure there are other coaches around the league who would do the same thing here, but Mike Tomlin now has done it. Not that means anything in the grand scheme of things here. I think it just goes back to you see these, you read these polls and all. Mike Tomlin is the coach most players would want to play for around the league. Yada yada. I think we got a good example of that the other day. And look, he even talked about. He's asked if he thinks Mason Rudolph will take some sort of legal action against Myles Garrett now, defamation of character stuff. I don't know if that's going to happen, but Mike Tomlin in so many words says, look, I wouldn't blame him if he does. Make no mistake about this. This is still serious here. This is twice now Myles Garrett has made these firm accusations. And, if you're a company right now, what does this do to Mason Rudolph's marketability right now? Not that he's that marketable anyway. I mean, most people would probably have him on the list as, I don't know, the 35th, best quarterback in the NFL right now, or maybe not even that high, if you will. Obviously not a budding star, yet. But I mean, for whatever happens down the road, say Mason Rudolph were to somehow manage to win a Super Bowl and all, it's always going to be kind of tagged on him. Well, he's that guy that was accused of uttering a racial slur. So once again, I think it goes back to Mike Tomlin handled this perfectly during the First Take interview there, and now I think we'll just sit and wait. And see what happens for him. Personally, I would like to see this just die down and go away. I'm sure the Browns organization probably is at that point too. Doesn't sound like there's too many people coming and running to the defense of Myles Garrett right now. But just one of these things that you hate to talk about and discuss during the offseason, and I don't think we're going to be done with it after Monday either.
I'm with you. I would say it's very quiet over in the Cleveland camp today. Not a whole lot going on to defend Myles Garrett. And also, while I am no lawyer, I would not recommend Rudolph to sue. I'm with you. I think you just try to affect this thing by trying to sue and have this thing pop up again. The quicker you can just move on and quiet down, the better. So if I'm Rudolph, I'm just trying to move on here.
And if you're Garrett, unless you got firm evidence here, you kind of look foolish as well too. Especially some of the most recent things that he uttered that we talked about. Pro Football Talk kind of highlighted there. Unless he's got hard, firm evidence and several players to back him up that they heard such a thing, I don't see how this helps his marketability or his career right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, I understand he might not have that direct evidence, but like I said, no one even came out and said this until Garrett was going through his appeals process 4 or 5 days after the fact. So, I mean, if that was something that happened, surely it would make sense for Garrett to tell players and teammates, and those teammates would want to come to Garrett's defense and give that important context and explain the whole situation, but that didn't happen. So it really makes it hard to believe Garrett's side of the story.
Yeah, and once again, I wasn't on the field, you weren't on the field. We just go go with what we know is being reported out there, and obviously try to be as objective on quite a sensitive topic as it is. But once again, we have no reason to believe Myles Garrett at this point. And back to the main story here, and Mike Tomlin being on First Take, I really think that spoke volumes what he did on Monday.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree, Dave. Other things Tomlin was asked on his interview with Stephen A. Smith and on First Take about Ben, reiterating what the team has said so far, that Ben looks good. They're encouraged by that progress. Tomlin said he has, quote, no hesitation about predicting Ben being ready for week 1. He'll have his checkup on Friday the 21st out in California, and that'll be a pretty critical visit with a doctor to kind of create his roadmap and hopefully get him back to some light throwing to start and put him on track for OTAs and, of course, mini-gear training camp in week 1. So Friday will be a very important day for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but right now still all sounds good on Big Ben.
Yeah, and, Mike, I thought Mike Tomlin was pretty candid there. Look, he hasn't done anything yet. But in so many words also said, look, we have no reason, still no reason to think that Ben Roethlisberger won't be able to come back and be the quarterback that he was, prior to this. Obviously, there's still a lot of this process that needs to happen with Ben Roethlisberger, and one would think it would start, in a few weeks from now when he has that next doctor's checkup. But everything we've heard from Colbert and Tomlin and Art Rooney II, and really kind of, I guess, Ben himself dating back to several weeks ago is until we have a reason to think that Ben, won't be the same or close to the same quarterback, we have to believe that he will be.
Yeah, and we know that Ben has not started to throw yet because he's still got that big beard. He was down at West Virginia, right, for a basketball game with Switzer, and he's moving around well, but we know he's not throwing because he's still got that Kiesel looking like beard.
Yeah, I thought that was great, him putting on that Mountaineer hat and all like that. It was what does this mean for Ryan Switzer? BFF, you got a little BFF going. No, look, in the grand scheme of things,
he could hide in that beard. I think Ben's going to carry him to camp inside that beard.
Obviously, they'll keep the guys that they think deserve to be on that team, especially when it comes to wide receiver position there. But I found it quite interesting that Ryan Switzer was with Ben Roethlisberger at that game there. But look, I mean, we'll just keep our fingers crossed right now with that critical checkup coming at the end of this month, and it's still a lot. We have a long off season ahead of us, and this isn't the last time we're going to be talking about Ben Roethlisberger and what kind of quarterback he'll be returning from this injury.
Right, end of the week for Ben is his doctor visit. Let me just read the quote really quickly. Tomlin on Ben. Again, Stephen A. Smith asking Tomlin if he felt comfortable about Ben being ready for week 1. Tomlin says, quote, I have no hesitation. I base that opinion on my experience and relationship with him and being around him for the number of years that I have. This guy's the ultimate competitor. He's dropped the gauntlet down. He's made a statement. He's coming back, and I look forward to watching him answer that challenge. So again, doctors will have to give the ultimate say, but everyone's expecting Ben to be ready for week 1, and I am as well.
Yeah, me as well. I'm interested to hear this. Look, I mean, I think at this point, even when we get to Ben's checkup, I'm sure Kevin Colbert, we've talked about that a few times, will be asked about that at some point during his scouting combine press conference that lasts all of, I think, 15 minutes there. So I don't think we're going to learn much. Hopefully the only thing that Kevin Colbert's uttering during that is, look, the checkup went fine, and now we go on to the next phase of this rehab, which will be some sort of kind of light throwing, working with tennis balls, if you will.
Let's hope so. Last thing Tomlin was asked about on First Take was about AB, and I'm generally very loath and not interested in talking about Antonio Brown, but Tomlin was asked point blank, basically, are you interested in bringing back Antonio Brown now that he's on his world apology tour of 2020? And Tomlin shot that down by saying, quote, I'll say this, once a Steeler, always a Steeler. We had great success over 9+ years with Antonio. We're always going to be interested in his growth and development as a man, and we'll be open to assisting him in that. But we have no current business interest at this time. For whatever reason, national media still believes the door's open, but based off of that, AB's never going to be a Steeler again.
Yeah, I don't see how you take listening to that, the context of that, and twisting that into the door is open for potentially an Antonio Brown return. I just don't see how you get any of that, and especially knowing what all transpired, at the end with AB, knowing how Mike Tomlin generally answers questions along those lines. Look, he's not going to come out and say, yeah, we're done with that dude. That's. I mean, he answered that in typical Mike Tomlin fashion, right? We're concerned. Look, once a Steeler, always a Steeler. We're concerned about him as a person. Currently no business. Just how he answered that, and knowing Tomlin and knowing the full context of everything there, I just don't see how people are twisting that into, maybe there's a chance, because I would put that at 0.000.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that bridge has been long burned in Pittsburgh. I'm sure they're rooting for him personally, but no interest in trying to bring that back. Dave, you missed a week of takes. The takes have been flying from former players and media people. I mean, it has been just a disaster in terms of the hot take world this week in the world of sports.
Yeah, especially look, stemming from this, from the things that Antonio Brown, the Antonio Brown apology tour, if you'd like to call it that, and obviously, the reissue or the doubling down of Myles Garrett on outside the lines and all. It wasn't supposed to be the quietest week.
I mean, I don't like to get into it, but you got Thomas Davis saying that Ben could have come back and he gave up on the team, and Chris Candy's dumb stuff, and Gil Brandt thinks the Steelers should sign Melvin Gordon. Like, it has been a doozy of a week for the media.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, I understand. Look, we're talking about it, right? And
I hate talking about it. I want to talk about it very briefly.
Right, but if we don't talk about it, then people wonder why we're not talking about it, kind of thing. So it's a catch-22. So I guess their hot takes, as foolish and as awful as they are getting the eyeballs and getting the ears. So. But I mean, I don't know what else we're supposed to do. We just, we have to kind of shoot them down, I guess, and move on with this thing.
Yeah, well, to shoot it down, Thomas Davis is wrong and dumb, and their Steelers aren't signing Melvin Gordon. So, I mean, there you go. All right, so that was everything, Tomlin. I thought it was a very good interview. Again, I don't know how much really it's going to change public opinion, but I certainly appreciate that, and I'm sure the Steelers locker room and Mason Rudolph especially appreciates Tomlin going to bat for him. Some Steelers news, or maybe a lack of news. We're still waiting on a new receivers coach. This situation's been pretty strange over the last week. Kind of a lot of controversy and uncertainty with the receiver coach position. Doesn't happen too often. As of right now, the position has not been filled. I'm sure the second we get off this podcast, they're going to announce who the new receivers coach is. We initially thought it was going to be Brian McClendon, the offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach at South Carolina. And there were then reports were that Jericho Cotchery, former Steelers receiver, was also interviewing. They had not decided yet. Then a report came out that McClendon was going back to South Carolina, which would assume that Cotchery's now the guy. Nothing's been, made certain yet. There's still conflicting reports out there. So right now you still have Brian McClendon and Joe Cotchery in the running. My assumption is that it's going to ultimately go to Cotchery. We don't know that yet. Either way, fresh face in the receiver room.
Yeah, and it's bad reporting is what it is. I think what it boils back to, and I think that stems back from a week ago Sunday when that first report came out of one of those. I think it was a television station in Columbia, South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken there, and basically said, and look, I think I tried to encapsulate this the other day that the Steelers had not announced the move yet. when we talked about it on the last podcast that we did together there. So it's not done until it's done. And right now, all we know of, at least according to other reports, is that McClendon and Kotchery both interviewed for that job. Now, could there have been others? Yes. and do we not know who those others are? That's definitely a possibility there. So I think it's easy to point to, okay, well, McClendon's possibly going back to South Carolina. That leaves Kotchery as the front runner, but that's only I mean that's deductive reasoning on being one or two guys, right? Mm-hmm. So look, I like Kotchery. I definitely thought he was a plus for the Steelers. The three I think it was the 3 seasons that he was in Pittsburgh there. He of course was there at the beginning stages, I think, of the Young Money crew. Very measured guy. Has definitely had a little bit of experience being an assistant wide receivers coach there in Carolina. So yeah, he checks a lot of boxes, I think, when it comes to being that guy. But is he the best option? Well, it's hard to say because we don't know how many other options there are for that job. So it is kind of a bit surprising, I think, that we still don't know who that person is going to be at this point, and unless we might be still wondering come Friday, as well. Now, obviously, this is kind of the first, I guess, quote unquote, business day back, being as how Monday was, essentially a holiday there. So if the Steelers don't announce the move today, well, it really makes you wonder, right?
It does. I'm not sure what's going on. Unless the report that McClendon wasn't necessarily going back to South Carolina, just said he would go back if he didn't get the job, but was still in the running for the job, and of course would take it if Pittsburgh offered. So I can't make heads or tails of the situation. Kotchery, as you mentioned, has been the Steelers or the Panthers' assistant wide receivers coach since 2017, so he's been in the NFL a little bit. Regardless of who they select, assuming it's one of Kotchery or McClendon, they're a fresh face, they're a youthful guy. McClendon's 36, Kotchery's I think about the same age, and so the Steelers, again, bringing in young guys that can relate to a young receivers group has kind of been the philosophy with a lot of the assistant coaches that they've hired. So that's the mindset of departure from the father figures they've hired in the past. Not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's just the reality of the situation. And hopefully by Friday's show, as you said, we'll get an answer for you.
Yeah, at least with Kotchery, he knows the culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there sure. is that side of it there as being a plus. Obviously, he doesn't have the experience, as a Daryl Drake or Richard Mann or Ray. God, you know me, I'd get Richard Mann back on that phone.
I think he'd hang up on you.
Yeah, yesterday. Now that AB's out of that room, I would have Richard Mann back in a heartbeat. But obviously, I think he's health and ready to be retired and all like that. But we'll see how this plays out by Friday.
All right, Dave, let's kind of skip back to last week, and this was the first big piece of news that came out that we hadn't talked about. Kevin Colbert speaking with the media. As you said, he'll speak at the Combine for about 15 minutes in about a week, but he spoke with the local media, did some interviews in and around Pittsburgh media, a whole lot to talk about. Obviously, I'm just going to kind of run through them. I know that you were away. You probably missed some of this stuff, so let's just start with Colbert and his contract. He says he was going year to year. He'd signed a contract through the 2021 draft, and he's kind of now open to staying here a little while longer, it seems like. He says, quote, "I can say this without any hesitation. As long as the Rooneys and Pittsburgh Steelers want me to be part of this organization, and it's a good thing for our family, we'll be here. I'm not looking to go anywhere else." That obviously refutes any sort of the suggestions early in the offseason about going to Carolina, which were always silly. We knew that was never going to happen. But Kevin Colbert, again, I still think he is year to year, certainly will not be here 10 years from now. But I think he's safely here for the rest of the Big Ben era.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where you and I have been on this thing all along here. The circle through the 2021 season, and then we'll see what happens at that point. I mean, obviously, look, Mike Tomlin's one of the longest tenured head coaches in the league at this point. The fact that Kevin Colbert's been with the organization as long as he's had, you go back to Ben Roethlisberger's career. I hate to say for sure because we don't know, but possibly coming to an end after the 2021 season. Marquise Pouncey, just going to be a huge kind of changing of the guard, probably, if you will, at that point after the 2021 season. So if I had to predict right now, I would say Colbert stays through the 2021 season. Beyond that, based on his age and everything else, it would just be a shot in the dark.
That's where I'm at too. So I think that would, for me, mean that he would sign one more one-year deal that would take him through the 2022 NFL draft, because right now he's only through the 2021 draft, not the whole season. So that's my guess of it. Again, it's playing it year to year, but again, that will, I think, confidently refute any idea that he would go to another organization, which was never going to happen. But now Colbert goes out there and plainly says it.
He can't leave this year. I mean, we're getting cheated out of the draft. We don't have we got to play the Kevin Colbert offseason draft movement game, and Blues Clues, as I like to call it. One last time here, right? I mean, we're definitely going to get cheated out of that this year. So I mean, we got to at least have one more draft past that to be able to play that. To me, that's half the fun of draft season, is going through all those things that we usually go through and trying to predict who the Steelers' first-round draft pick is.
Yeah, it's our national pastime, I think, and they're taking that away from us this year. Other things that Colbert said, talked about James Conner, and at least publicly showed confidence in him. Now, granted, kind of course, you would expect the team to show that outward, show of support, but Colbert basically said that they're still committed to and confident in Conner to bounce back and get through the injuries, and just basically saying he's a talented player. So not a whole lot to take away from there, but they're still publicly, at least, high on James Conner.
Yeah, I think you've been with me on this from kind of the start as well too. I'm not surprised with him saying what he said about the running back group, and especially as it relates to the draft, Alex. I mean, I understand based on what's happened with Conner and his injury history, and the overall kind of look at the Steelers' running game the last couple of years, and all, not obviously kind of going backwards in successful run rate, a lot of different statistical categories there. But all that said, and look, if I thought this team needed to and should draft a running back early, I would have no issue putting any of that, out there right from the get-go and putting it in my mock drafts and all like that. But I'm not saying that they're not going to draft a running back this year. But from where I sit right now, and based on all the little things that have been said, which obviously hasn't been much on the topic, I'll be shocked if they draft a running back in first couple of picks. And in my opinion, I think we've talked about this a few times. If you don't pick a running back in, let's say, the second or third round here, you might as well not pick one at all. And look, is Jalen Samuels, a guy that you can rubber stamp and say this guy for sure is going to be on the 53-man roster at this point? I don't think so, but I do think that James Conner and Benny Snell Jr. are, and that's a heck of a 1-2 punch if you can keep those guys healthy. And you got a couple other guys on the roster, and Lord knows what you might get cheap in free agency coming up at the running back position, and also maybe as an undrafted free agent. And heck, if you want to add one, in the 6th or 7th round, you can. But from where I was not shocked one bit, and people say that I think someone tweeted at me, oh boy, that's just a smoke screen from Kevin Colbert when it comes back to the running back position. I don't think so, Alex. I have found Kevin Colbert to be very truthful over the years, and being able to circle back and pointing to context and certain quotes of him telling the truth, especially when it comes. I don't believe Kevin Colbert plays a lot of that draft smokescreen game, if you will.
Yeah, he's weirdly honest. He's not going to tell you a lot, but he's going to give you a general idea for the direction of this team. So I'm
that whole thing on Mason Rudolph. I picked on. I'm not going to spend too much time patting myself on the back here, but I think reading in between the lines, at kind of this same time, a couple years ago, people say, "Oh no, Dave, there's no way this team's going to draft a quarterback." Going through kind of the things that he said, it pointed to that potentially happening, and it did happen there. So, just in general, going back through the years, and when it comes to Kevin Colbert and things that he has said during the offseason, I don't view what he said about the running back group as being any kind of GM speak or smokescreen, if you will. I think he firmly believes that they have the guys that they like right now on the depth chart there at the running back position. And unless something drastically changes in the coming months, I don't expect this team to draft a running back. Period.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now, if it does happen, I think I'm in agreement that they need to do it high with a day 2 pick. Anything after is just muddying an already muddied backup situation anyway. But I think for me, it's even less about James Conner because the team has to recognize that health, it's hard to trust him. That's just a fact. But I think they really like Benny Snell. I think they like Benny Snell more than what the fan base and certainly more than what the national media likes. I think he had a really strong rookie year, even with that injury in between the surgery to come off of that and still play well. So I think there's a lot of confidence in Benny Snell to be the guy and to be a really strong number 2 in the work and rotation with Conner. Then you add in Samuels and Kareth White Jr. and you should maybe UDFA or whatever. You throw those guys in the mix. I mean, they're likely to only carry 3 running backs. It's more likely than not that they're not going to deal with a running back this draft class.
I agree.
But speaking of quarterbacks, since you mentioned it, now we're to go the other direction. Colbert saying in the past, we'll maybe look at a quarterback this year. I mean, they're all screaming, and the national media better wise up here. They probably won't, but they should. This team's not taking a quarterback. The quarterbacks that are on the roster right now, they've been Mason, Duck, Paxton Lynch, and I'll throw in J.T. Barrett for the Ohio State fans listening. Those are the guys that are going to be in camp come this July and August, except maybe not Barrett. But they're not adding anybody else. And so Colbert says that they're basically comfortable with the situation. Colbert says, quote, Mason Rudolph. Mason was 5-3 as a starter. Devlin Hodges was 3-3 as a starter. Was that good enough? No, because they didn't play good enough, and we didn't play good enough as a team to qualify for the playoffs. But are they young, potentially ascending players? Absolutely, he says. And then talking about Mason, he says, quote, the most encouraging thing about Mason was he started off, did some nice things, hit his slump, he was benched, Devlin came in, filled the gap. When Devlin got pulled in the New York Jets game, Mason came off the bench and did some really good things before he suffered a season-ending injury, so we're encouraged by that. There's a lot in that sentence there, obviously, but the bottom line is they're expressing confidence in both guys, but more specifically Mason Rudolph. And bottom line, agree or not, this team's not addressing a quarterback in any significant way this offseason.
And last week when I read all this, I did not clutch my pearls, okay?
Yeah.
I don't think either one of us did. I mean, I think
you didn't fly back home and say,
no,
I got right up?
No, not at all. I'm not shocked at all by it. I think that's one thing that we've said right from the get-go here. Ben's your quarterback. Your backup is Mason, and they'll figure out who the number 3 is. Whether it be Paxton Lynch or Devlin Hodges. I was still and not a lot to go on or base this on. But if I were to bet on it, I would bet that Paxton Lynch winds up being the number 3. But I think it's going to be one of the two. I don't think I'm going out on a limb too far to say that it's going to be Paxton Lynch or Devlin Hodges. They're assuming, obviously, that things go well with Ben, but even if things don't go well with Ben, I think the quarterbacks on that depth chart right now, you're going to have some combination of 3 of them that are going to make up, obviously your depth chart there, and I fully expect there to be 3 on the 53-man roster this year. I think Kevin Colbert would tell you the same right now as well.
Yeah, and he actually had an interesting note on Paxton Lynch. Here's the quote from Colbert on Paxton. He says, quote, we're also encouraged to have a young man like Paxton Lynch in the group. Paxton Lynch is a talented guy that's moving into his 4th season, but he's a talented former first-round pick, and sometimes a talented young guy finds a new home and finds a path back into significant play, so we think Paxton could. And you're right, he's got a big arm and the pedigree, and that fits well with Pittsburgh, and he certainly could make the team as the number 3 next season. So, and again, just because the lack of draft capital, there's only 6 draft picks, so many other holes they got to fill, other positions, and the lack of money in free agency they couldn't spend on a veteran backup quarterback, even if they wanted to, kind of puts them in a corner and says they have to be happy with the group they have. But again, they're still confident, at least outwardly, in Mason Rudolph.
And I assume that comment about Paxton Lynch was kind of unsolicited,
Yeah, I don't remember the context if he was asked. I think he was just asked about the quarterback situation in general and kind of went down the line of guys of Mason and Duck and Paxton. So I think, this is basically on Colbert's own volition.
Yeah, so like we said, barring something totally unforeseen at this point, look, I would fully expect this team to have a quarterback or two, maybe not necessarily as an undrafted free agent, but as a rookie minicamp invite, if you will, and see if another one of these kids can pull a Devlin Hodges. Obviously, to predict such would be foolish, when it comes to such. But they're going to be hurting for camp arms or for rookie mini camp arms as it is right now, because I don't think Mason Rudolph qualifies for it. I don't think Paxton Lynch qualifies for it. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger doesn't qualify for it. I'm not entirely sure Devlin Hodges qualifies for it at this point, but maybe the rules with him just being a second-year guy would allow him to do that. Obviously, you got Barrett that can take part in a rookie mini camp, and one would think that at least one more, depending on the rules and whether or not Devlin Hodges could qualify for that. That would decide whether or not you bring in yet another either undrafted signee or more than likely just a tryout arm there.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a tryout guy. My guess with Barrett is that he's here just for rookie minicamp, and assuming all goes well for Ben, he'll probably get cut. Barrett would be to get another tryout guy on the roster at a different position. That's kind of my guess at it. So I don't think we're going to see JT Barrett in come training camp time.
You would think, though, that you'll be writing about 4 quarterbacks in training camp at the start, though, right?
Yeah, Ben, Mason, Duck, and Paxton, that's the 4 I strongly believe will be in training camp. Nobody else joining that party.
Right, because obviously they're going to have Ben on probably some sort, assuming he's, things go well, he'll be on that, probably on that, every third day or whatnot.
Well, it'll be interesting. I don't know how they're going to handle that. Obviously, it's going to be based on his rehab, but do you work him more? Do you work him less? I mean, I don't know how they're going to judge that. I think that'll be really something to monitor.
Yeah, let's cross that bridge later.
Yeah, fair point. Speaking of guys that will be in training camp, while not said for certain, we're kind of playing the tea leaves here. It seems like Vance McDonald will be part of the 2020 Steelers group. This is talking about Colbert is about the whole optimism heading into next year and kind of the health of the team. And Colbert says, quote, "I feel optimistic we will have Ben back. I hope the health kicks back in for James Conner, for Vance McDonald, for Juju Smith-Schuster." So the fact that he's mentioning McDonald and assuming good health for him would kind of hint and imply that he expects McDonald to be on the team in 2020, which means the team will pick up the option due next month on Vance. So not a guarantee, but it seems, again, I'll use the phrase, more likely than not, Vance McDonald will be a Steeler in 2020.
I came across this website and this author, Dave Bryan at SteelersDepot.com here back in...
That's good work. I've heard of him.
January 7th. I think, let me make sure I got this right. Immediate offseason future of Steelers tight end Vance McDonald isn't cut and dry. And in this article, he goes on to say that, don't be surprised if tight end Vance McDonald was still on the Steelers roster after the start of the new league year, meaning that his option year had been picked up at least initially for the 2020 season there. Look, I'm obviously having fun there, Alex, but we've talked about this several times here, about the shape of the overall depth chart here, if you will. I mean, look, you've got you don't even know at this point right now if the net's going to be back. You obviously drafted Zach Gentry, and you want to talk about a jury being out right now on a player. It's definitely out on him. Kevin Colbert is not the type of GM that goes into a draft with a huge gaping hole at any one position. Now, even though he'll kind of put Band-Aids on those positions heading into draft and ends up 9 times out of 10 still drafting that position, he does not like to go in handcuffed into that. Mm-hmm. So, look, I think I and probably 90% of the people listening to this podcast firmly believe the Steelers will not only draft a tight end in this year's draft, but kind of get one early as well too. But on the flip side, I think and believe that Kevin Colbert's looking at this. And look, even if you don't know the type or quality, you're not just going to take a dart and say, well, it's our turn to pick, guys. Here's the tight ends left. Let's throw a dart at the board and see what it's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 guys that they like. And if those guys aren't on the board, they're going to continue on down the board to a different position there. So look, we still have a couple of weeks to go. Things can obviously change when it comes to the overall thinking of McDonald, and at least in his immediate future, meaning past the start of the new league year. But I think you would have to lay bets right now that based on what kind of the context of what Kevin Colbert said, that you would put your betting money on McDonald at least being here through the start of the new league year. And as I wrote, I think in that article, look, even if he makes it past the start of the new league year, you're not married to him. Okay, meaning that you can get to the point come the start of the regular season after the dust is settled during training camp, where maybe you look at your roster, however it looks at the depth chart right then, and maybe it includes a high draft pick, and you say, okay, we're pretty comfortable with this. We want to save the $5+ whatever $1 million in cap space on McDonald here, so we're just going to cut him loose. Now, odds are pretty good that if McDonald does survive past the start of the new league year, that he'll survive at least one more season on this roster. But I guess we're at the point now where I warn everybody once again, don't be surprised if he's on this roster past the middle of March.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, as you said, Colbert doesn't want to go in the draft with some sort of glaring need. Look at inside linebacker last year. I mean, he signed Mark Barron because you didn't know if you were going to get Devin Bush or not.
Exactly.
And if you didn't, then you had to protect yourself, and you wanted to at least have that fallback option. So that, same approach there. But again, even assuming Vance is on the roster, for me, as I wrote about 2-3 weeks ago, you got to find somebody else, because Vance's ceiling is 500 snaps. I mean, you cannot go above that and expect him to be available for that or be competent enough in terms of his play and production above 500 snaps. So you got to find somebody else. And plus, you draft a guy, because tight end's such a tough position to make a transition to, so he kind of is in a rotation for a year. Then maybe after a year from now, then you're looking at that guy to be the number one going forward. Maybe you move on from Vance then. So that's kind of my outline, is also to get somebody who can help you now, but then have a year to kind of be groomed for the future. So I expect Vance to probably be a Steeler in 2020. The only question is, remember how we did the salary cap math about a month ago, and part of that equation to get under the cap and still tag Dupree was not picking up the option on McDonald. So now you do that. That's a decent amount of money you have to work around to make this thing, work cap-wise.
It's going to be very, very tough, man.
Because that was our path, was you had to cut those 4 guys just to get under the cap and tag Dupree.
Well, I mean, that maybe do some restructures based on what the limits are currently in this 30% rule in the CBA, right? I mean, yeah. Look, I have no qualms about saying I think I'm going to learn something new in the coming weeks here when it comes to the Steelers managing their cap situation. Maybe this team is banking on. And it's something that you kind of threw out early in the process there about potentially signing Dupree prior to placing the tag on him. So maybe this team, their want to keep Bud Dupree is tied a lot to whether or not they're able to get Dupree signed to a long-term deal, prior to the start of the new league year. Okay. Now, even if you did, the 30% rule still makes it tough that based on what you would expect Dupree's contract to kind of look like and all, first year cap hit would save you. Obviously, you would think would be lower than the 16 point whatever million of the tag, but by how much?
Yeah.
Probably not a lot because of the 30% rule. So obviously you don't have to get him signed just yet. You probably keep your fingers crossed that the that a new CBA can kind of extension can be reached here in the coming weeks. But you also have to be prepared if it doesn't. And you do have to adhere to the 30% rule when it comes to the contract structuring with Dupree here. So likely, yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, is there somebody else that could be a surprise? I mean, a surprise cut, or kind of doubtful. I mean, I think we've kind of cut it to the bone through these exercises that we've done. Could they maybe Vance McDonald's not going to redo his deal? I don't think. He would probably tell you just cut him. And he'll take his chances to see if he can earn that money on the open market there. So Yeah, it's going to be, like I said, I mean, these next few weeks, it's definitely going to be interesting to see the Steelers take the path to being cap compliant and also including Bud Dupree somehow in that equation, and Vance McDonald, if should that be the case.
Right, very, very tricky. And speaking of which, Colbert was asked about Dupree's situation by Missy Matthews and kind of how that relates to the salary cap. And Colbert said, quote, "As we're putting together the free agency plan, the draft plan, it all comes together and we see what we can do from a salary cap standpoint. That's the process we'll be in throughout the whole draft. We may have to make some decisions prior to that." I think so, Kevin Colbert. He also says, quote, "The franchise tag is always available to us. We'll never say we wouldn't use it. We'll never say we would use it."
He says that every year, though.
I know. Yeah, this is very standard Colbert stuff here. The first person who would find that out is the player himself, but we're not at that point yet, nor do we need to be. We have until March 10th. We'll see how things go. So that is not as strong of a statement in favor of Bud as Rooney and Tomlin, but I think Colbert has to be more pragmatic because he's the one dealing with it more up close and personal when it comes to making these financial decisions and commitments. I still expect the team to, worst case scenario, tag Dupree. Still would like to work out a long-term deal. That obviously could be difficult. Time is becoming a bit of a factor here. Maybe during the combine time, those things kick up a little bit more generally when everyone kind of gets together. So we'll see. But as you said, Dave, it's going to be very tricky cap-wise, especially if they're going to pick up the option on McDonald.
Yes, especially. I mean, do you? I mean, you still have some dead money involved with some of these other players trying to trade them. To save some salary here. A guy like Alejandro Villanueva, I think has played fine. I think for $5 million, he's a hell of a damn bargain in 2020. But I'm sure there's some faction of the fan base that says, "Well, just cut Villanueva." You can only cut so much here, folks. We've already gone over the big names here. Chicolo, gone. Foster, gone. Mark Barron, gone. I mean, where else do you trim other than that? I mean, you're not going to save a whole heck of a lot of money by cutting the Daniel McCullers or the Tyson Alualus, or, I mean, we're already nixed the idea of cutting Vince Williams because you don't really save anything there. I mean, there's nobody else to cut.
All right. So then you have to restructure Ben and extend out Cam Hayward.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Cameron Hayward, even that extension right now, barring a new CBA agreement, is not going to save you that much in cap space.
What, $3 million on Hayward?
At most, and trying to put the pen and paper to that, it's hard to even come up with a $3 million in savings there, Alex, because of what I think Cameron Hayward will need as far as new money average and as far as what Cameron Hayward will need as far as the cash flow goes. So when you do that and you have to have that contract comply with the 30% rule, I think maybe more realistically is saving maybe $1.5 million to $2 million in cap space versus $3 million. And I know you think people are probably saying, well, the difference between $1.5 million and $3 million is only $1.5 million. Well, that $1.5 million cap space is pretty huge. Yeah. As we sit here right now, but did find it. Look, and circling this, obviously back to what he said about Vance McDonald, it's not guaranteed. Still at this point that Vance McDonald makes it to the start of the new league year here. But I think your betting money would have to be on that happening.
Same. One last quote from Colbert on Dupree, because he did obviously speak highly of Dupree in the season that he had. I think Missy Matthews asked, Colbert about this being a difficult decision and kind of contract considerations and all that. And Colbert says, quote, "Bud did that to himself with his play. Bud had a great season. He's established himself as a significant starter in the National Football League. He will have value not only here and around the rest of the league, and we recognize that. So hopefully it doesn't get to that point where we're talking about the rest of the league. But I mean, $16 million is nothing to sneeze at in terms of the tag.
Right, and look, we're probably half listening to this. Might be okay with signing Bud to an extension, or no, probably a third. Another third will say just let him play under the tag for 1 year to see if 2019 was a mirage, and another third probably just say I don't trust him, let him walk. Yeah. I think there's I don't think any one of those three choices are out of the equation right now. and it's specifically based on the cap situation this team is. Now, obviously, I think just letting Bud Dupree walk away via free agency would be the less likely of the three. But the other two, definitely, obviously, is an option, and it'll be interesting to see what path the Steelers ultimately choose if it's one of those two things.
Yeah, it'd be really tough to see them let him walk when they've talked about how big of a priority he is. It wouldn't mesh well with what they're saying, but there is a cap element, and obviously a guy wanting to be able to sign a guy back and being able to sign a guy back at the expense of other moves is something this team has to work through. So I'm still expecting the tag for Dupree. Is that still where you're coming in at?
Yeah, that's where I'm at. It'll be interesting. Like I said, I'm going to learn something here. As much as I think that I like to think that I know about cap and cap management and getting cap compliant in tight situations here, I have a feeling that there's going to be a aha moment for me here in the next few weeks here.
And the tag window, I believe, opens up at the end of the month and closes March 10th. Generally, the team puts a tag on a couple of days before that deadline. They won't do it at the very start. They generally don't do it at the very end. It's usually a couple of days ahead of time, that March 10th deadline. So we'll keep you posted. It'll be very interesting to watch. One other thing Colbert did say, talking about Ryan Shazier, still not a lot of clarity in terms of what's going to happen with Ryan Shazier. I'm trying to find the best quote here from Colbert. He says, quote, "You're dealing with a young man who's trying to regain his career. We'll always support that, whether it's by a certain date or certain terms. Just call it a unique situation. They're not putting a ceiling on what Shazier can do." Colbert reiterated Shazier's goal to get healthy enough to be able to play again. Still not a lot of clarity though on what's going to happen in terms of him contractually.
Yeah, and you know what, Art Rooney II. I'm not sure Art Rooney II has a firm grasp of the CBA.
Well, I imagine somebody had to have told him, because Rooney said it's unlikely his contract tolls, and I used to believe that it could. I have to imagine somebody talked to Rooney and told him that. Rooney wasn't reading the CBA for himself there.
I am still under the impression that there's a good chance that Ryan Shazier's contract will toll again. And obviously that comes from Joe Corey, former NFL agent, several weeks ago. I still have no reason to believe that it won't toll again. Okay.
If it was going to toll, wouldn't Colbert just say that though and be like, okay, his contract's going to toll?
Maybe he's not fully firm. Maybe there's still some gray area in this that they're still trying to get cleared up, because It doesn't specific. It is, as Joe Corey told me, it doesn't specifically address this situation in the CBA. Okay.
Yeah, there's no really precedent for this.
Right. There's no precedent here when it comes to this, but I mean the CBA does say that a player in the final year of his contract, if placed on, if he spends his season on reserve PUP, the contract tolls. So the final year last year tolled, and he never played. So does that final year carry over into this year? We'll see. At worst, let's assume that it does toll. Okay.
That it does.
Let's assume that it does toll, and that he's not ready to play. Is there any reason to believe that Ryan Shazier will be able to compete for a job in training camp right now?
There's been no indication of that.
All right. So let's assume that it does toll. And if it does toll, I could foresee this team following the same process as they did last year, turning around and placing him on which would be active, or did they place him on reserve PUP?
I think he went straight to reserve PUP last year.
I'll have to look at it. I think he may have as well too. So if he went straight to reserve PUP, he no longer counts against the 90-man roster at that point, and goes into the split salary classification as well too. So you want to talk about saving $500,000 roughly? That would do that, because I think Ryan Shazier, if the contract does toll, it would toll at $820,000. Obviously, a split salary would be less than the NFL, $400-something thousand when it comes to there now. Now let's assume it does not toll.
Right.
All right. Well, then you sign Ryan Shazier to a minimum salary benefit contract, possibly, because I mean no other team's going to sign him, right? One thing. So you would sign him to a 1-year minimum salary benefit deal, modest minimum signing bonus possibly there, and then obviously that comes with a depreciated salary cap amount, being part of the minimum salary benefit rules. So at least you save a little bit of cap space that way. So.
And then he would go on reserve pup.
Then I suppose he would go on reserve PUP, and I'm not sure how split salary. I'm not sure of the rules on a minimum salary benefit contract and split salary kind of deal, because you're already kind of getting a discount, as it is on the minimum salary benefit. So I don't know if there could be a clause in there that is split salary be slightly even less than that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But regardless, it sounds like he's going to be part of a paid position player-wise based on the context of Kevin Colbert's quotes the other day.
My only question would be, if his contract tolls, it's easy. You just follow the same steps as you just laid out. If it doesn't toll, can he pass a physical? How does that work in terms of signing a new contract? If it doesn't toll, he becomes a free agent. They have to sign him back or re-sign him or whatever the case is. That's the question I would have.
I don't know, because in the past people have asked, well, how do you release a player if he's not, a player maybe under contract that doesn't pass physical? Well, remember just a couple of years ago, you had Greg Warren released with a failed physical. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, players obviously can come back and claim that one-time injury claim. We saw Ladarius Green do it around the same time too, right? As Greg Warren. You fail these guys with a failed physical, and then you release them under the failed physical designation there, and then obviously they have the ability to come back and recoup that money.
But we're doing the opposite here. We're signing a guy who can't pass a physical.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe he could pass a physical, but not by NFL standards, you wouldn't think.
I don't know the specifics related to that.
Right.
Once again, that leads me to believe, going back, that there's a distinct possibility that this contract will toll. Mm-hmm. Right, and if it does, I wouldn't be one that tells you so.
So this is the guy who pulled my record from like January 3rd. No, I hope it does, and maybe it does.
No, look, it'd be nice to. These little kind of gray areas are the fun gray areas that I like learning about.
You're learning a lot this offseason.
Oh yeah, look, definitely am. But to me, as we stand here right now, and obviously this can change, and maybe we'll learn something new. But there's no reason for me to believe that his contract won't toll as we sit here today. Even though Art Rooney says I don't think it tolls, and this, that, and the other. We're going to learn real quick though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are. I hope it does, because that's going to be the easiest thing for Shazier and this team. All right, that was about it from Colbert. Is there anything else that Colbert said that you happen to catch your ear that you wanted to talk about? I think I hit on all the major points.
I'm at your mercy here because I don't have the list in front of me.
All right. Well, I think that was about everything. One other thing we want to talk about, before you left, Dave, you had your first mock draft come out. I think it was a very good mock draft, and I think you're mad at how well you did because now you have nowhere to go but down from here. You gotta undersell this thing to start.
For some reason, Alex, it seems like my first mock drafts every year are hits, and that scares the living hell out of me for some reason. And usually, sometimes I think when you circle back, it's some of my best off the cuff choices, or guys at least that the Steelers probably shown interest in some degree. Now, I understand that you probably have some issue. I mean, it can't be all roses on your end as far as these selections here. But I wrote this thing up. I obviously learned quite a bit about these guys in a fairly quick manner here from the end of the season on through the Senior Bowl, and obviously on through last week. Looked at quite a bit of little bit of tape, if that makes sense, on a lot of these guys. Obviously, I know more about the top end of the guys than I do the bottom end of the guys, but I suppose you're wanting me to go through it pick by pick here, and with the Steelers' first pick, which is really in the second round and 49th overall. We talk about slot receivers, right, Alex? We talk about guys that can move around in this offense. We talk about guys that the Steelers kind of lean towards these underclassmen. We talk about guys with football family backgrounds, if you will. We talk about guys that check as many boxes as possible, especially when it comes to first and second round choices. Justin Jefferson out of LSU, I think, really, really checks a lot of those boxes. He comes obviously out of LSU, a top college Power 5 program. Man, I don't know how much tape I really didn't know a lot about. Really, I didn't know nothing about Justin Jefferson until really the national championship game, and really the college playoffs as a whole. But really the national championship game there. Went back and watched a lot of his tape. Did a fairly lengthy contextualization on his targets. Boy, what an athlete this is. Not a Blazer by any means, but this is a guy that spent all of last season, I think, playing predominantly in the slot. The year prior to that, moved around a little bit there. An exciting guy. Boy, 165 catches over 2 seasons, over 2,400 yards. 24 touchdowns. That's no joke when it comes to a kid in the SEC. The kid has very impressive tape in 2019, and buzz about him will start increasing very soon if it hasn't already. This is a deep wide receiver class, so odds are probably fairly good that Jefferson, who's probably not going to light it up in a 40-yard dash time at the combine, might fall to the Steelers in the second round. Boy, a football family here. I think obviously a family that I think has had brothers come through LSU, and I think one is still on a roster of the New Orleans Saints there.
Yeah, I started watching Jefferson a little bit just because I've been watching a lot of Thad Moss because I'm doing a report on him, and so Jefferson's obviously kind of caught my eye. So you're looking at him to kind of play more in the slot? I mean, I know you said he can move around, but kind of where do you think he fits best?
I think as his rookie season, you try to use him wherever you kind of need him. Okay. Obviously, I don't think he's going to come in right away and play 60 snaps a game. Sure. But I mean, how many times have we talked about how this team really could use another slot guy? Would give you the ability to move Juju around a little bit more. And look, make no mistake about it, we think that we know what's going to happen with Juju past this season, right? But we also don't think Juju's going to sign a contract this offseason either, right? So, I think you have to prepare yourself for the potential Juju maybe not being back. On top of it. And once again, this kid can move around in the offense, and I think you could do worse for a number 4 wide receiver on this team in 2020 with Justin Jefferson.
Let me ask you this. When you first did your mock draft, did you expect to mock a receiver that high, or did it just kind of happen as you learned about Jefferson and kind of felt like was on the quote-unquote board?
It just, look, I mean, we don't know where these guys are going to go in this draft. Sure. Obviously, I kind of circled this as being maybe a tight end, a wide receiver, or maybe a defensive lineman. Okay, those are kind of the 3 positions that I had it narrowed down to, kind of looking where the speculation is, where these guys will fall, and kind of not being as big a fan of the Purdue tight end as maybe you are there. I chose to kind of go a different direction there and go wide. Look, I mean, I love the Baylor kid too, the Mims kid. Yep. I really think that could be a guy, that could be in that spot. But I think when you look at Justin Jefferson, top to bottom and kind of checking the boxes, I think he checks a lot of them as well too. So in lieu of kind of having a different name in there on top of it, that's why I went Justin Jefferson there.
What about your third round? There's the train. Welcome back. Oh, sure, you missed to go with your third round pick, a name that was on my mock draft too.
Yeah, a guy that I think is going to be easy to associate with the Steelers the rest of the draft season here with the compensatory draft pick that'll probably be right around selection 100 or slightly higher. Devon Hamilton out of Ohio State. I've done a look at his sacks and his pressures and all, and look at his play against the run. I think the third round is a perfect spot for a guy like this. I don't believe Devon Hamilton to be an every down player, at least not initially in the NFL. I think he is a guy that can come in, however, and give you some base 3-4 snaps at either the 0 or the 1 tech and kind of go from there. Developmental guy, much in the way, kind of like Javon Hargrave was the Steelers, who also was a third-round draft pick there. So kind of hard not to associate Devon Hamilton with being a potential target of the Steelers. And once again, this position, in my view, was either going to be a wide receiver, a tight end, or a defensive lineman. Obviously, already mocking a wide receiver in the second round. Took one of those choices off the board there. So I went with Devon Hamilton there.
And then in the fourth round, I like the Hamilton pick. I think that'll be a very popular one in Pittsburgh. Fourth round, you're going offensive line. And this is a guy I need to learn more about, but I'm very excited to watch.
Yeah, when you look at battle test, left guards, I think we both agree could potentially be a high target. We've said that for I don't know how long. Interior offensive linemen, and especially if this team moves on from both B.J. Finney and Ramon Foster this offseason, yeah, you're going to have potentially Matt Filer as maybe a one year fix potentially at left guard there, but you probably need something else younger, and Lord knows this team hasn't drafted offensive linemen high in quite a while here. I think Solomon Kindley, look, there's a slew of them. There's a kid out of Kentucky, the kid out of Oregon there that could potentially fill this role at left guard. Really like Kindley from an all-around perspective. He can anchor well in pass protection, moves fairly well as part of a power running game. While he likely will not be ready to be a day one starter in the NFL, he is certainly a guy I think that you could groom nicely during his rookie season. I like his level of nastiness. I researched his character a little bit, watched a few interviews with him. Just comes off as a Steeler kind of guy. And this draft class, I think you would maybe you will, maybe you won't agree that this year's draft class isn't filled with great interior offensive line talent. So I think Kindley figures to be one of those mid-round selections that a lot of teams are going to be interested in here.
I agree. Not a great interior offensive line class. I think Kindley fits well. He's 6'4", 335. Steelers like their guards big. Did he move around at all, Georgia? Or is he just a left guard?
I think he's primarily a left guard, Alex.
Did he play other spots? Did he move anything a right guard in college, or do you know his background?
I'm trying to. Yeah, I've obviously had a whirlwind week here. So I'll have to look at specifics on his bio, but I don't see if he moved around. It wasn't much.
Gotcha. All right. I like the fit, though. Other fourth-round pick, you go Jalen Elliott from Notre Dame. I almost had him in my mock draft. I think this is a name Steeler fans probably need to be learning more about.
I don't know. Maybe you can shed more light on him than what I have out there. Wound up being a Senior Bowl participant. Probably better suited to play down low in the box more so than, say, a post safety position. Captain at Notre Dame. To read the reports and all coming out of Mobile and Senior Bowl when you're down there, was supposedly the biggest riser of any prospect in Mobile, and was also named the North Squad Defensive Player of the Week. That's something that I think the Steelers will stand up and take notice of. I got to admit, look, it's still early in this process. I haven't taken a deep dive into his college tape, but what little I've seen makes him certainly seem like he could be a mid to late round safety candidate for especially the Steelers. And look, we've talked how many times that this team not much on the depth chart behind Terrell Edmunds and Minka Fitzpatrick. Really nothing on the depth chart as we sit here right now. When it comes to that, you would probably like a versatile safety and probably one that could predominantly maybe help you more in the box as opposed to a post safety position, and also one that's going to probably help you immediately on special teams. I think Jalen Elliott out of Notre Dame checks all those boxes. Tell me a little bit more about him from what you observed down in Mobile.
I thought he had a good week. I think the scouts that would say he was the biggest riser. That's probably a touch too strong for me. I probably could come up with a list of 3-4 names, Trautman, Josh Jones, that were bigger risers, but I thought Elliott had a good week. Now, I saw him play more of the post than the box, so I'm not entirely I'm not sure. I talked to him briefly. He said they're moving him around. He was going to play different spots, so I don't want to say that's who he is, but that's where he was playing on a particular day. I pay close attention to him. I do like him, though, and as you said, captain, and I think a good athlete and a good sturdy build. I'm guessing the Steelers will have a pretty strong contingent, or at least send Terrell Austin to Notre Dame, because they got a couple of Notre Dame guys in the secondary that'll be worth watching at their pro day. Whether you're talking Troy Pryor Jr. or Jalen Elliott, I think there's a third Notre Dame guy whose name escapes me right now. So you should see somebody from the Steelers in terms of Austin, maybe Butler, Tomlin, Colbert, being at the Irish Pro Day.
Boy, and they were there. They had a contingent there last year, right? So I'm sure Jalen Elliott's not a new face to them right now, because weren't they there with Love and who's
Boykin.
the wide receiver, Boykin, last year? So I bet they know quite a bit about this guy. Oh, this guy's also from Richmond, VA.
Oh, well, put him in Penn then.
Mike Tomlin neck of the woods there. So I bet Mike Tomlin knows more about Jalen Elliott than maybe what we might think at this point here. So hard to imagine. I think push to come to shove. And look, when you do these early mock drafts, right, Alex, you try to get the guys that check the most boxes, and you try to get the ones that kind of match the positional needs, and you also try to match up where you think, and I use that term loosely, of where you think these guys are going to be drafted on top of it. So going through all this and going through the process that we normally do, it really was very easy for me to put Jalen Elliott as the Steelers' 4th-round draft pick.
And I'm guessing it was even easier for you to pencil in this 6th-round pick with your boy, tight end Charlie Warner from Georgia.
Boy, I like this kid, Alex. I think you figured that out by now.
I picked up on that. You sent him a Valentine's Day card.
Pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Look, he's still not. I haven't seen it. Still not getting the buzz, I don't think yet. But I think come combine time, which is just a couple of weeks away, I think you're going to start hearing more about Charlie Warner. Is he a guy that could potentially still go undrafted? Yeah, I think there's a chance of that, because how many times do we see 7, 8, 9 tight ends only get drafted in a year? The biggest drawback I think with Charlie Warner right now is just how he was used at Georgia. And I was back home this past week, and a couple of my buddies are Georgia Bulldog fans, and we're just trying to ask those guys, why don't they ever use those tight ends? At Georgia, I mean, yeah, they do use them as blocking, and boy, if you're going to be part of that program, you better be able to block there at Georgia. And I still maintain by the the study that I've done on the tight end so far in this class, which obviously isn't deep at this point, but specifically when it comes to tight ends in the SEC, Alex, I think Charlie Warner might have been the best blocking tight end in the SEC this past year. Yeah, he wasn't targeted that much, but I think when you look at his entire target selection from his entire college career, which I have at this point, I know that might be overkill for a guy this late of a round prospect. Soft hands, I think he can get it done. A good bad ball catcher, everything that I've already talked about, I think, when we talked about Charlie Warner. So, and it's a big if the Steelers wind up waiting on a tight end in this draft and having to do so, let's say, day 3 of this draft, Charlie Warner, I think, could be, I caution everybody, no, he's not the next George Kittle, but I think he could be the next Foster Moreau, and Foster Moreau is a kid that both you and I liked quite a bit, I think, last draft season, and a guy that we thought had a good chance of being a Steelers draft pick last season, and probably only two or whatever selections away from that actually happening there. So, yeah, it was easy for me to put Charlie Warner as the Steelers' 6th-round draft pick, being as how I bypassed the tight end position in the first few picks of this mock draft.
Yeah, that would be the one thing where it's like, tight end a little bit later than what you would like ideally. But again, when you only have 6 draft picks total, it's hard to make everything work nice and neat, and address it, significantly with early round picks. But I hear you. I mean, blocking tight ends are the Rodney Dangerfield of college football. They get no respect. I mean, no one talks about blocking tight ends, but they're so valuable, and you generally see those guys go higher in the NFL when it comes draft time than maybe they were valued and looked at in the college game. So I think Warner's a good pick. We'll see how he worked out at the combine. I'm sure he's not working out I'm not sure he's not running a 4 or 5.40, but we'll see what he times.
Have you had a chance to dive deeper into his film since I've started talking about him, or no?
No, I haven't been able to yet, but I'll try to circle back to him before the combine.
All right, 7th round, probably not a surprise. Look, when you're this late and all, you're trying to get guys that you know a little bit about that you think could be Steelers, and probably not a surprise that I picked Evan Weaver out of California. We've already had several discussions about him since the Senior Bowl happened and all. It's a lack of better choices, I think, and just needing to learn more about the bottom end of this draft class, Alex, as a whole. But a guy that I think we've kind of turned him potentially the new Tyler Matakevich, if you will. Probably not likely to be a starting linebacker at the NFL level, but probably a guy that can give you some backup snaps there. A guy that should be a special teams dynamo right out of the box there. So it's probably not a huge surprise that I went Evan Weaver with the Steelers' final pick in my mock draft.
It's not, but it's a good one. It's scary how similar Weaver and Matakevich are. Weaver's a little bit taller, a little bit lankier, but not by a whole lot. So if they lose Matakevich in free agency, which I very much hope they do not, hope they can retain on a relatively cheap 2 or 3 year deal. But if they lose him, then I think Weaver's a great replacement.
All right, and that would be that. Where would your biggest issues with this mock draft be?
Just being tight end in the 6th round, and I think that's such an important need, not only for this year but the future of the position too. And if you move on from Vance after 2020, then hopefully you have a high draft pick that can kind of step in and be that guy, as opposed to trying to hope that Gentry can step up or your day 3 pick can work or whatever the case is. I think that makes it a little murky. But again, with 6 picks, it's hard to make it perfect because it just really can't be when you only have 6 picks and limited money in free agency to address some of those needs as well.
Yeah, it made look like I said, and that first pick there in the 2nd round, being as there's no first round pick, that's going to dictate heavily the way the rest of that mock goes. Especially knowing or thinking that we know the positional needs of this team as we sit here right now in February pre free agency there. So if you go wide receiver, obviously in that 3rd round, if you better either follow it up with a tight end in the 3rd round compensatory pick, or you're probably going to wait.
Right. By the way, since you mentioned it before we start talking about what your mock last year looked like, I found your first mock from 2019.
Oh, Lord.
It's actually some good ones. You got Scary Terry in the 3rd round. You got Terry McLaurin for Pittsburgh in the 3rd round of that mock draft. That was solid.
I loved it. You remember, I love that kid. Did a contextualization on him, wondering, man, why? I think there was that good buzz about him though coming out of the Senior Bowl there. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that buzz reached the level it should have by midway through the mock draft process or pre-draft process, if you will. And I just remember doing a contextualization on him and being kind of blown away by him.
And you had some good day 3 gems. You had Foster Moreau in the 6th round, and you had Tony Pollard in the 7th round. So both of those would have been good additions for Pittsburgh.
What did the rest of it look like? Go ahead, give it to me.
The rest is not as pretty, but this is the first mock. Your first round selection in your first mock draft 2019, Ja'Kai Polite.
Oh, yeah, I remember that now.
But that was before he tanked everything. And
right.
No one knew that he was going to have that terrible pre-draft process. 2nd round, cornerback from Penn State, Amani Aworiye. I think he went 3rd round, to Detroit, I believe. And then other 2nd round pick, I think this is you were projecting a trade here with the AB when we thought maybe get a 2nd round pick. Other 2nd round pick, you had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who I think went around 3rd round in New Orleans, and I'm pretty sure actually had a pretty solid rookie year.
Yeah, he did.
And what else you have? You had Terrell Hanks in the 4th. I remember both of us were really high on Terrell Hanks, and he ran like a 5 flat at the combine. I think he had a hamstring injury. And then you had Kalen Saunders in the 6th round as well, big D tackle from Western Illinois.
All right, so obviously full of misses there.
No, you got Scary Terry. I think pretty for the first mock draft. You got Scary Terry, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Moreau Pollard. I'd be pretty happy with that.
Let me tell you, Terry's going to be a star in this league, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Really, really good player. Just that speed is no joke.
His ability at top of the routes to the way he moves with his footwork off the line, and the way his ability to separate at the top of his routes and or run that kind of stop and go. Boy, that kid is very, very impressive. He's the new young guy, one of a few, obviously, at the wide receiver position that I think really going to be the future in this league here at that position.
Yeah, and Ohio State knows how to churn them out. They got more Buckeyes this year with KJ Hill as well. All right, Dave, no ad read today, so we can jump to some reader emails to close out the show.
All right, did we hit everything else we wanted to talk about? I assume we did here.
Yeah, looks like we got everything.
Let me see if I can...
While you do that, we pull up the emails again. We'll be back Friday. Just to let you know, our schedule is Tuesday and Friday. Doing 2-a-days. We may go back to 3 if something big happens during one particular week. So just a heads up there for those listening.
From Matt Robb, I think this is more directed at you. It says flying blind. Peter Weber seemed like a promising prospect at the beginning of the season, but I think it's fair to say he's been a disappointment. I assume this is all Bachelor related here.
It is. I'm sorry to bring you through this again. Yeah, Peter's been a first-round bust. The season has been horrible.
All right, this one from Jason, looked like Folland, future Hall of Famer here. David Knox, awesome podcast. Keep it up. I was listening to your last episode while running a marathon. I was boy, you might want to put us down and make us feel like we don't do anything. Listen to an episode while he's running a marathon. I was surprised to hear you guys think Ben is going to be the next Hall of Famer for the Steelers after Faneca. What about AB? Look, I mean, I think there is a possibility that AB, but I mean, there's so much, when you talk about the length of career so far with AB, make no mistake, he was the best wide receiver in the league for a period of 5, 6, 7 years there, and him putting the amount of over 100 receptions in all those years back to back and all, and even if he never plays another down in the NFL at this point, and despite his off-the-field actions and all like that, this is going to be a guy that I think you do consider for a Hall of Fame. Will he be first ballot, though?
It's really tricky. I mean, that's on a lot of different layers. Obviously, from an on-field perspective, he's a first ballot slam dunk Hall of Famer just based off of that alone. But then there's two factors. A, the off-the-field stuff, how much will that affect him? It could. I mean, maybe it should or shouldn't. You can argue that, but it probably will have some sort of impact. And also just how much longer will he be trying to play football? Will he work his way back in the league and still outlast Ben? Because obviously he's a younger guy, and Ben's probably got 2 more years left. So it's just kind of one of those weird things where you don't really know where the end of AB's career is at to begin that wait time for Hall of Fame eligibility. So it's a weird situation. I hear what you're saying. I'm still going Ben because I'm more confident in kind of where this thing's going in terms of his path. But AB will be a very interesting test case of the Hall of Fame qualifications.
Look, I mean, Terrell Owens obviously played longer, right? And obviously has more numbers there. But when you look at wide receivers and being the best at their position, if a guy like Terrell Davis can get in, right? Seemingly one of the best at his position during the brief time that he played. Now, obviously, he got some Super Bowls in there, right? Something AB doesn't have to this point, so that might hurt AB to some degree. There obviously some voters, they say that they're not supposed. Look, who knows what goes on through these voters' heads and all, and how they might penalize AB for his off the field actions. But I mean, AB was arguably the best receiver for several years in the game there. So no, it's not going to be surprising if at one day Antonio Brown gets into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Will he get in before Ben Roethlisberger? My bet would be no.
Yeah, I'm with it, but also on the basis of AB could be playing late. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. It'll be very interesting, like I said.
It's going to be hard as long as there's a team willing to give AB a chance, he's probably going to stay around the league as long as possible.
Right, and I sincerely believe if he stays on the straight and narrow, which I know is very, very tricky for him to do, some team will sign him, assuming the NFL clears him from their current investigations. I think he could, I don't know how long it would be, but I think he would try to get back with a team in some capacity sometime later in the offseason.
All it takes is one.
Right, all it takes. And if you have talent, Teams will look past all the other stuff.
Yep. All right. This one, Bryce is checking back in. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that when it's time to pick at 49, that if we're going tight end, it needs to be Adam Trotman. Still have to see what the cone and 40 time will be, but looking at his overall game tape, he's definitely got some Heath Miller in him. Can separate at the top of the route, solid hands, put his hand in the ground, good size, effort, strength in the run game. All that small school stuff doesn't matter if the guy is a gamer. Look, I mean, you're probably preaching to the choir here, Bryce. So I don't know what you're asking our thoughts on that is, because other than the small school stigma and potentially his age, because he's seemingly a little bit older, but everything else on tape checks out.
It does, but that small school thing, I can't ignore it. I mean, last time they drafted a non-Power 5, not even, below FBS player was 2004 with Ben and Coakley. So the history's against it. They better be at his pro day or bring him in for a pre-draft visit. If they don't do either of those things, it's going to be even harder to justify projecting that as the pick.
I have no doubt they're going to be all over him in this pre-draft process.
I mean, it makes sense, but I'm just saying they better show that interest, because it's like with Hargrave, where Mitchell went down to South Carolina State for the pro day and worked him out there. They better, for them to take a small school guy, their interest has to be sky high, and it'll be clear in the pre-draft stuff that they do.
And make no mistake, come the rest of this process, at the end of it, Trotman could be the top tight end in this class.
Right, which means he's probably not going to make it to 49.
Exactly, because I know you're doing a little bit more research on a couple more guys there, talking about Moss out of LSU and all, but the top of the class isn't great.
Yeah, Moss is a heck of a blocker, though. I mean, if you want blocking, that him and Trotman are probably your guys.
He's better than what I first my initial dive into him being Moss. Talking about Moss. There's more on tape than meets the eye initially with him, talking about Moss and his blocking. However, the receiving end of it, 40-something catches is 40-something catches, but I think you saw in the contextualization that there needs to be more there to make him a first or second round guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, not a downfield threat, not an after the catch threat. There's certainly limitations in the pass game.
Right. Bryce also asked, in terms of the safety position, what would you say they need more from a backup depth perspective? A rangy ball hawk or more in-box style player? What does the current depth at safety most lack, in your opinion? Look, you have to. The more obviously the correct answer here and the easy answer is get the most versatile player you can. All right, and that's why I went with the kid out of Notre Dame there. If you were to pigeonhole me into which one I think I'd rather have, more from a strong or a free safety type, I would tend to go with a strong safety type. But obviously, I think the more versatile of a safety you can get, the better.
I'm with you on the versatility. I would lean free safety just because I value that higher than I do strong safety in general. I think it's easier to find a box-type strong safety as opposed to a rangy playmaking free safety. But they need both. I mean, there's no depth at either spot. I guess you could assume that Dangerfield comes back and they give you maybe a little better depth at strong safety, though Danger's also played free before. But really, it's wide open at both spots. You just find the best talent available.
Are we come September going to be writing another article, something playing on the Dangerfield gets no respect?
Well, he's not going to get tendered, right? I mean, he's going to have to get re-signed, so that's kind of the first step with Dangerfield is that whole thing. But he's got a path if he works his way back, because I mean, there's nothing there right now, and they better address safety. They ignored it last year, and I said that was wrong. That was a mistake, and I think they're kind of paying the price for it.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you're able to bring Sean Davis back somehow, some way. You know?
You see the deal that Chuck Clark got last week? You got like 3 years, $16 million for Baltimore. I mean, this is a half-year starter filling in for Jefferson. I think Davis is at least getting $4 to $5 million per year.
Wow, that's a lot. But I mean,
is it? I mean, if Clark's getting, I think Nick Corte projected Will Parks to get like about the same as Chuck Clark, and I can't see Davis getting really anything less than that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I definitely, it's not a thing that I would predict to happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be nice though. I mean, I'm all open for it.
I mean, like, it would have to be a minimum salary deal, you know?
He's just not going to take that.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. You wouldn't think so. Let's see here. Outside of Devin Bush, what second-year defender are you expecting to make the biggest leap in 2020? Boy, there's not. I mean, unless
UG3. I'm going UG3.
Yeah, it would have to be him or Justin Lane would have to be your choices, right?
Well, I think Bugs. You could throw in Isaiah Bugs as well. He's with a higher path to play time, assuming Hargrave is gone. I think Bugs and UG3 are kind of my guys. Lane, though, is interesting too. I just don't see the path to playing, but hopefully he looks better in year 2 than he did in year 1.
You would think that UG3 would have the path to potentially 500 snaps or more. Maybe.
How would you project that?
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, you're going to move on from Barron, right?
Right.
Vince Williams is going to have X amount of snaps, 500 maybe. You know,
I see Vince as your base and nickel guy, and Bush as your every down backer next year, assuming Barron's gone.
I think there could I mean, at some point, depending on how quick he picks it up, I think you could see UG3 get into some of those Vince Williams snaps.
I'm not there yet, but if there's an injury, obviously, all it takes is one injury, and then the door is wide open for UG3, absolutely.
A guy that definitely made a move last year during the preseason. I mean, look, Justin Lane, barring any type of injury, it's hard to predict Justin Lane seeing any playing time, right? You know?
Yeah, I'm still nervous about that pick. I didn't like it at the time, and I don't feel a whole lot better about it now, to be honest with you.
Well, there's not a lot to go on other than what we saw during the preseason, which obviously wasn't good, right?
Yeah.
You know, early on, which was kind of to be expected there, but. we got a lot to learn about him still, I think, you know.
Sure.
You mentioned Bugs. Yeah, I mean there were no moments there, but once again, you know, not a large selection of plays and all, right? You know, to go on. There was noticeable progress, however, comma.
Yeah, I mean, there's only, what did he play, 75 snaps last year? Maybe, if that, maybe even less. But I was impressed by the limited action he had.
Let's see if I can find us another one here. Kind of a little bit behind in trying to keep these things tight end to look at from Jason Higgins here. I just finished listening to, and this was from a week ago, just finished listening to the last podcast and heard your piece on Charlie Warner from Georgia. I'll give you another to look at in the ACC. Dominic Wood Anderson from Tennessee. As far as quarterback play goes, I'll see your from, because I was talking about from and not being overly accurate, and raise you a Garantano. Quarterback play at UT has been pretty awful over the last couple years. To compare the numbers of Warner, stacked up 376 yards and 1 TD over 4 years. Wood Anderson had 408 yards and 3 TDs in 2 years. He's a combine invite and measures in at 6'4", 257, decent blocker with room for improvement. Obviously, seems to have decent hands, but mostly used as a blocking tight end. Anyways, if you can give him a look, I'd be interested to hear your take on him. Jason, you know, I ain't got to trust my arm to get me a look at kind of good all-around tight end prospects. So give me a little bit time to get on that there. One other one here from, it looks like Adam Zerner. This is for the Ask Alex thing. Okay. Sorry if this is in the wrong place. I couldn't find a better one. Conventional wisdom is Steelers Nation is that we have to re-sign Dupree. The main rationale is seemingly because there'd be a huge drop-off from Dupree to Adani, Skipper, Chicolo, but I don't think Adani, Skipper, Chicolo is the alternative. We could take those $16 million we'd be giving Dupree and put $8 to $10 million into a capable free agent edge and use the rest to, example, replace Foster and use the rest. Example, replace Foster. Isn't that the right way to look at it? Isn't the question whether Dupree is worth the value at $16 million rather than whether we'd have to re-sign him or whether he deserves it? Don't get the full. I get the overall general question there, but look, if you're going to go into free agency, the devil you know in Dupree is probably better than some of these middle-end free agent guys that, let's say, $8 to $10 million classification.
Yeah,
we have some breaking news here, Alex.
Okay, guess it's receiver related.
Yeah, Ike Hilliard has been named the Steelers wide receiver coach. Obviously, Ike Hilliard is a former NFL wide receiver. We talked that maybe there's a potential candidate out there that maybe we weren't aware of. It ends up being Ike Hilliard.
Or Ike Williams or Ike? So I'm seeing someone said Hilliard.
Ike Hilliard.
All right, someone else has it on Twitter incorrectly. All right, is that the former Buccaneers receiver too?
Let's see.
Yeah, he's in Tampa. He was with Tomlin, right? No, was he with Tomlin?
Let's see. He was a wide receivers coach for the Washington Redskins the past 6 years, his second stint with the Redskins, and has spent 9 years as a receivers coach. Let's see. He coached Terry, talking about Scary Terry. Coached him. Let's see. He was a receivers coach for the Buffalo Bills in 2013, the Redskins 2012, as well as the assistant receivers coach for the Miami Dolphins in 2011. Hilliard got his coaching career kicked off as a receivers coach for the Florida Tuskers of the old UFL, United Football League. He began,
he was with Tomlin in 2005, was his rookie year in Tampa, as Tomlin's last year with the Buccaneers.
He was selected by the New York Giants in the first round of the 1997 NFL Draft, the 7th pick overall. He spent 8 seasons with the Giants and 4 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers there. He played 161 career games. So there you go. Hilliard replaces Ray Sherman, who came out of retirement and served as the team's interim receivers coach in 2019 after the passing of Daryl Drake during training camp. Previously, the team hired Matt Canada to be the team's quarterbacks coach there. So it ended up being a name that we said might be off the radar there, and it was him.
Yeah, so much for Costry or McClendon, but so they're going a little more veteran here, which I can appreciate. So, all right, well, I'll write that up, and we should probably close out the show then.
We should. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast at gmail.com. If you want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com and hit that donate button, upper right navigational bar. Also, if you would like an ad-free version of SteelersDepot.com, hit that button up there as well too. A lot of you reached out to me on the sudden passing of my dog Finley Pearl on Monday. I certainly do appreciate that. If you're so inclined, make a donation to the Humane Society nationally or here in Las Vegas, here in Finley Pearl's name. I certainly would appreciate it. So with that, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.